The rain on Sci-Lexus 7 didn't fall so much as hiss. It slid down the rusted domes and toxic pipelines like acid chewing through old bones, leaving trails of green corrosion that shimmered in the station lights. You could smell it before you saw it, a mix of burnt ozone, oil waste, and something else, something metallic and organic, like a battlefield long after the screams had stopped. That kind of smell never left a soldier. And I had been one. Once. My name was Reuven. I used to carry orders on my back like sacred truth. That ended the day those orders told me to pull the trigger on unarmed settlers, people with children and no weapons. I didn't fire. I never did again. The court didn't forgive me. The implant they jammed into my skull was supposed to force me to feel the pain I'd refused to cause, to teach me a lesson in empathy. All it really did was break something inside me that never healed. Now I walk. I scavenge. I trade parts no one else wants. I talk only when I have to. I never get involved. That night on Sci-Lexus 7, I told myself I was just passing through. I had a deal to pick up a power cell from a shady mechanic named Bryke. I wasn't there for the auction. Hell, I hated auctions. Especially those kinds, the ones that didn't trade goods, but lives. The auction hub sat below the surface docks, lit by flickering blue lights that always made me feel like I was underwater, drowning in someone else's sin. The crowd was the usual mess: fat merchants wrapped in gold cloth and suspicion, mercs with broken visors and twitchy fingers, scientists with dead eyes behind data goggles. No one came here clean. That's the point. I kept to the shadows, my coat pulled close. I told myself I'd just pass through, grab a drink, kill time until my delivery came through. That was the plan. Then they brought her out. She didn't stumble like the others. She wasn't shackled by chains or screaming for help. She simply stood still, calm, like she'd been waiting 100 years and had already seen what was coming. Her skin was the color of quiet starlight, soft violet fading to midnight around her hands and neck. Her hair fell like silver wire down her back. And her eyes, those eyes. Gold. Burning. Unblinking. They weren't looking at anyone, but it felt like they were looking through all of us. Past the meat and the noise and the credits. Straight into whatever rotten core was left inside. The auctioneer wore a smile carved from cruelty. "Ladies, gentlemen, and all other intelligent profit holders," he began, voice slick as engine grease. "I present to you our final item of the evening. Designated E-Delta 13, codename, Illyra. One of the last living empaths of the Real Mind Project." He circled her like a man who thought himself a god. "Now I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone want an empathy? Let me show you." Someone from the front, a tall figure draped in blue silks, raised a hand. "Demonstration," they demanded. The voice was filtered, but impatient. The auctioneer grinned. "Gladly." He pulled out a small injector. Pressed it against Illyra's arm. There was a hiss. A pale spray of gas. Nothing happened. She didn't even blink. But the man who made the request screamed. It was sudden. Violent. He collapsed forward, clutching his shoulder as if it had been lit on fire. His eyes rolled back as veins bulged beneath his skin. People gasped, and then, of course, they applauded. Like it was a game. The auctioneer bowed. Pain reversal. Emotional inversion. If someone cares for her, just cares, they feel what she should. The more you care, the more it hurts. I should have walked away. Hell, I wanted to. I'm not the hero type. I'm not some righteous soul with a sword of justice and a flag of morality. I was broken. Battered. Living proof that doing the right thing once can ruin you forever. But when I looked at her, something inside me cracked. It wasn't the pain. It wasn't the science. It was that she wasn't screaming. She stood there, silent, enduring it all. And her eyes, those golden, quiet, impossible eyes, turned just enough to land on me. Just me. That's when my hand moved. 42,000 credits, I said. The room went silent. A few heads turned. A merchant laughed nervously. The auctioneer blinked, then grinned wider than ever. No further bids. No one answered. Because even monsters have instincts, and something in my voice told them I wasn't bluffing. She's yours, the auctioneer declared, voice triumphant. Just like that, she belonged to me. No. Not belonged. No one like her could ever belong to anyone. But the galaxy didn't care about that. He brought her back through tunnels no one walked anymore, corridors filled with the quiet moans of old pipes and the kind of darkness that didn't just hide things but remembered them. His quarters weren't much. Just an old cargo pod, long since detached from its original function. A forgotten place, hidden behind industrial vents where heat and noise masked every kind of life. If you didn't already know it was there, you'd walk right past. That's why he chose it. It wasn't safe. But it was invisible. She followed without speaking, her steps silent. Not hesitant, not afraid, just controlled. Like someone who had learned that the more noise you made, the more you suffered. He opened the door, let her in, and waited for her to react. She didn't. No questions. No confusion. Her eyes swept the space: one narrow cot, a crate for a table, 2 old ration packs stacked in the corner. She stood in the center, collar still glowing, like she was waiting for a command she hated but had to obey. He placed the controller on the crate with a heavy motion and pointed toward the cot. Sit, he said, not sharp, but not soft either. A voice worn down by too many regrets. She sat. For a moment he just looked at her. She was still wrapped in that tight gray restraint suit, arms loose at her sides, breathing steady. The glow from the collar pulsed faintly at her throat, like a heartbeat not her own. He hesitated. Then picked up the controller again and pressed the release. There was a hiss. A sound like pressure equalizing in an old airlock. The seals on her suit loosened, joints unlocking around her shoulders and spine. Her arms relaxed. Her hands shifted. And then, slowly, her eyes blinked once. Twice. And for the first time since he had seen her, she moved like a person. The neurological dampeners will take 22 minutes to fully deactivate, she said. Her voice was low and precise, not cold but measured. Like someone who had learned language by studying instruction manuals. It wasn't the voice of a girl. It was the voice of a program given flesh. He nodded slowly. I'm not your master. She turned her head. Not abruptly, but directly. Her gaze was level, golden eyes burning like dying stars. You paid for me, she said. That stopped him. Not because it wasn't true but because of how she said it. Not with blame. Not even with sadness. Just fact. As if she had long accepted that this was the shape of her life. That whoever placed the highest bid would be her fate, and that fate didn't need to make sense. He had no answer. Instead, he reached for the water capsule on the shelf, cracked the seal, and handed it to her. She took it without hesitation but didn't drink. She held it in her hands, the way one might hold a delicate thing they didn't want to destroy. Why did you buy me? She asked. Her voice this time was quieter. Not hesitant but closer. Closer to human. Like the question had left her mouth before she could pull it back. He didn't answer right away. He looked away, to the rusted corner of the pod where mold had started to grow again. Maybe he bought her because he couldn't stand the look in her eyes. Maybe it was the way she stood in that cage like she'd already survived something that should have killed her. Or maybe it was because, for a second, he saw someone else in her, not her face, not her voice, but the hollow inside her chest that matched the one inside his. I don't know, he said. And it was the truth. She didn't press. She just sat, quietly, holding the water like it might still spill if she breathed wrong. They didn't talk after that. Not for a while. Because some silences aren't empty. They're just waiting for the next wound to speak. It began with something small. A twitch in her hand. The capsule of water, still untouched, shifted slightly as her fingers spasmed. He noticed, but didn't react. She hadn't moved in over an hour, just sat there like a sculpture with breath, not watching him, not watching the room, just existing. Quietly. As if she had learned long ago that movement invited consequence. Then she winced. Barely. Like a nerve somewhere deep inside had woken up. She tried to hide it, but Reuven saw the flicker of pain cross her face like lightning behind glass. He pushed off the wall and moved closer. Are you all right? He asked, voice low, careful. She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked toward the far corner, and her breathing changed slightly faster, slightly tighter. That's when it hit him. The pain didn't crawl. It slammed like someone had driven a spike through the base of his spine and poured boiling lead into his veins. His knees buckled. He caught himself on the crate, breath ripped from his lungs. His vision blurred. He choked on nothing, and the floor tilted as if the room itself was trying to throw him off balance. He couldn't speak. Could barely think. His body screamed. Muscles locked. Sweat broke across his skin like sudden rain. His neural implant was flaring glowing an internal firestorm he had no defense against. And across the room, she still hadn't moved. She sat there, still, calm, eyes wide with something like fear, but not for herself. For him. I warned you, she said softly. He couldn't speak, but he knew what she meant. The pain wasn't hers. It was his. Because he had cared. Even just a little. And that was all the system needed. He dropped to one knee, gasping. What the hell? The bond, she said. It's active. You felt something for me. That's the trigger. He clawed his way to the wall, back pressed against cold steel. I didn't. I wasn't trying to. You didn't need to try, she replied. You saw me. That's enough. She stood, slowly, carefully, as if movement itself might make the pain worse for him. She reached into the medkit, pulled out an injector, and crossed the room. He flinched when she got close, not because he feared her but because he feared the wave that might come again. But she didn't touch him. She knelt beside him, holding the injector out, waiting for his consent. He nodded. Barely. A hiss of pressure. Relief came, not complete, but enough for his lungs to find air again. She looked at him for a long time, her face unreadable. This is why no one keeps us, she said. He swallowed hard. Because you hurt them. Because we make them remember what it means to feel. He stared at the floor, every muscle trembling from the echo of the overload. He'd felt pain before. The battlefield had no shortage of that. But this wasn't from a bullet or a burn. This was personal. Precise. A pain tailored to fit the shape of his care. The system hadn't punished him for touching her. It had punished him for not being willing to walk away. He looked up. "How do you live with this?" She blinked. "I don't." He didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. This wasn't a curse designed to protect her. It was a cage meant to isolate her. Because the moment someone loved her, they paid the price. And she watched. Every time. That was the worst part. Not the pain. But the fact that she had to watch it happen. The pain faded, but it didn't leave. It clung to his body like an old fever, the kind that never truly breaks. His limbs still ached, his breath still came rough and uneven, and every time he glanced at her, something inside his chest stirred, not fear, not resentment, but a strange kind of ache that had nothing to do with the nerves in his body. It was the ache of knowing what she carried every single day. She didn't speak again that night. She moved back to the cot, sat down cross-legged, and stared at the corner of the room like it held all the answers to a question no one had dared ask her. Reuven sat slumped against the opposite wall, slowly sipping water, trying not to look at her too long, even though everything in him wanted to. It wasn't attraction. It wasn't lust. It was something quieter, deeper, more dangerous. It was recognition. By the next day, he was able to stand. She offered him a nutrient packet without a word, and he accepted it, their fingers brushing for the briefest second, and though there was no immediate burst of agony, both of them flinched. The bond had grown again. That much was obvious. They were no longer two isolated entities simply sharing space. There was a tether now. Something unseen. Something waiting. "You said the pain is based on care," he finally said, voice still rough from the previous day's collapse. "So if I stop caring?" "You won't," she interrupted. He raised an eyebrow. "That sure of me, huh? I've seen the way you look at broken things." He blinked. "Excuse me. You fix them. Even when they are beyond repair. Even when it makes no sense." He laughed softly, but there wasn't much humor in it. "And I suppose you're one of those things." "No," she said. "I'm the thing they never meant anyone to fix." There was no anger in her voice. No defiance. Just that same calm acceptance that made him furious, not at her, but at whatever monsters had designed her this way. She wasn't a weapon. She was a mirror, forged to reflect the pain of others until they cracked under their own kindness. "So what do I do then?" he asked. "Push you away? Pretend I feel nothing and hope the system resets?" You can't reset a bond once it activates. The link only deepens. "And if I stay? You'll keep hurting. And if I leave?" She looked up at him then, truly looked, eyes burning like captured sunlight. "I will." That silence between them returned. He hated it. Hated how loud it was without sound. How many things it said that neither of them were ready to admit. He walked over and sat across from her, this time closer than before. "You said I fix broken things," he said. "That might be true. But I don't do it for the things. I do it because I'm tired of watching good things rot just because no one cared enough to try." She didn't reply. But her hands clenched slightly in her lap. He leaned forward. "So here's the deal. I'm staying. Not because I'm some savior. Not because I think I can rescue you. But because I choose to. And if the universe wants to punish me for that, Then fine. Let it. You don't understand what that choice means, she whispered. I don't have to, he said. I just have to mean it. And he did. In that moment, with every damaged cell in his body, he meant it. He didn't know where this path would go. Didn't know how deep the bond would run or how badly it might tear him apart. But he knew one thing. No one should carry pain alone. Not her. Not anymore. The knock came on the fourth day. It was subtle, even polite. 3 slow taps, measured like someone checking for a heartbeat through steel. Not loud. Not urgent. But it cut through the silence of the pod like a scalpel. Reuven was at the crate, tinkering with a broken signal booster that hadn't worked in years. Illyra was sitting by the vent, studying his movements like a puzzle she hadn't decided to solve yet. At the sound, both of them froze, not in fear, but in knowing. The kind of stillness that happens only when something inevitable has arrived. He stood slowly, set the tool down without a sound, and crossed the pod to the door. He didn't open it. He just listened. Beyond the thin metal, footsteps shifted, soft but armored. He could hear the gentle hum of an atmospheric scanner, the faint click of a security badge being tapped against a data console. Then the voice came. Resident Varks. Station compliance check. Please open the door. Not a demand. A request. That was worse. He turned toward Illyra. Her expression hadn't changed, but her shoulders had stiffened. Not from fear. From calculation. You know who it is, he said. She nodded once. They've traced the bond. He took a slow breath. We blocked all outbound signals. The bond isn't digital, she replied. It's biological. A neural field. Once it resonates, it echoes. They are not tracking a person. They are tracking a frequency. He looked at the door again. They are going to come in. Not yet, she said. They want confirmation. He moved to the console beside the hatch, activated the visual feed. 2 figures stood outside. One wore the standard uniform of dock security gray, unimpressive, uncomfortable. The other. White. No insignia. No rank displayed. Just pure Imperial protocol. An agent. The kind who didn't kick down doors. The kind who waited because they already knew you'd open. Reuven keyed the speaker. This is a private residence. I don't see a warrant. The security officer responded. Random compliance sweep, sir. Nothing serious. There's no such thing as random on Silexa, Reuven replied. A pause. Then the agent stepped forward. Your recent purchases were flagged, the voice said, smooth, cold, without accent or warmth. An anomaly. Not illegal. Not yet. But, irregular. Scrap is rarely regular. You paid 50,000 credits for a sealed lot labeled BioReject A13. Curious. That's the price of curiosity? Another pause. You live alone? Reuven glanced at Illyra. She was standing now, backlit by the old emergency lamp, her silhouette still and sharp. Her hand rested near the panel leading to the crawl space behind the storage bay. An escape route they'd both walked in theory but never in practice. I live alone, he said. I see, the agent replied. There was no accusation. No confrontation. Just a note being taken, somewhere in a system far too large and too slow to feel personal yet devastating in its reach. We'll return, the voice added. Soon. And just like that, they were gone. No breach. No search. No violence. Only the promise of return. He sealed the door again, then turned toward her. They know, he said. Yes. And they're giving us a chance. No, she corrected. They're testing how much you're willing to risk. He sat down heavily on the cot, stared at the wall for a long time. The humming in his skull was back. Low. Steady. Her field pulsed through it faint, like the memory of music. It didn't hurt this time. Not yet. But it was present. Real. You could run, he said. You've done it before? I wouldn't get far. You'd be free. She looked at him, no anger, no sadness. Just a quiet firmness. I'd still feel the pain. Yours. Even from light years away. He exhaled slowly. Then we run together. She stepped closer. And if they find us again? He didn't look up. They will. Another silence. But this one didn't sit heavy. It sat ready. Like something about to take its first breath after being buried too long. I'll start packing, he said. And this time, she didn't argue. Because they both knew. Once the empire knocks, it doesn't stop. But neither did they. They didn't look back when they fled. There was nothing behind them worth remembering, just corridors full of flickering lights, vents that moaned like dying creatures, and steel panels that had watched too many desperate people pass beneath them. The maintenance tunnels beneath Sci-Fi 7 were made for forgotten things, and now, Reuven and Illyrio were among them. They climbed through the vents like ghosts, crawled behind coolant ducts thick with grime, and finally slipped into the waste chute, a place where only the dead, the broken, or the unwanted ever passed. They sealed themselves in a disposal container, one of those reinforced things meant to eject contaminated supplies. It smelled of rust and synthetic mold. It was cold, damp, and reeked of places that had never known sunlight. It wasn't glamorous. But it worked. The container launched during the third cycle shift. No inspection. No questions. It tumbled for hours before stabilizers kicked in, guiding it toward an old salvage belt floating in the dark like the bones of long-dead gods. From there, they found passage on a freight hauler heading toward the outer rim, and from there again, another jump to a mining colony where names were forgotten and currency spoke louder than history. For weeks, they kept moving. Changing names. Faces. Stories. Reuven shaved his beard. Dyed his hair. Changed his voice. Illyrio wore cloaks that masked her silhouette, lenses that dulled her golden eyes. She never complained. Never hesitated. But Reuven could feel that something inside her was drawing tighter with each passing system. She didn't fear pursuit. She feared being believed to be safe, because safety for her had always been a trap in disguise. The Empire didn't need to chase them with guns. It chased them with whispers. Wanted logs, false reports, manipulated footage. Slowly, piece by piece, the image of a dangerous asset and her traitor protector was painted across the stars. They weren't fugitives anymore. They were a threat. A weapon and her keeper. A myth reborn in neural files and border scans. He heard it in docking stations, in alleyway murmurs, in drunk conversations of mercenaries. The girl who made others bleed for her. The soldier who refused to let her go. Some said she was a ghost left from the mind war. Others said she could kill with a thought. No one mentioned that she cried in her sleep, or that she flinched when kindness came too close. The stories were easier to carry than the truth. Then one day, in a satellite market orbiting a derelict moon, someone followed them. Reuven noticed first. A woman with a limp and a shadow in her eyes, dressed like a scavenger, but her boots were military grade. She didn't approach, not right away. Just watched. Waited. When Illyra looked at her, the woman didn't blink. That's when Reuven knew, it wasn't a bounty hunter. It was something older. They met in a maintenance bay filled with broken drones. The woman stepped forward, pulled back her hood, and spoke in a voice like gravel soaked in memory. "You're not a curse," she said to Illyra. "You're a key." Illyra froze. The words landed like a blow, but not one that hurt. One that shook something loose. The woman stepped closer, careful, respectful. "They built you to be a prison. To make others suffer. But you're the one thing they can't replicate. A living signal. A feeling too deep to quantify. They fear that. Because feelings are the one thing they can't control." Illyra's voice came low, unsure. "Who are you?" "Someone who remembers what we lost. And what we might still win back." She handed them a chip. Simple. Plain. But encrypted beyond anything civilian grade. Reuven held it for just a moment before slipping it into his coat. The woman said nothing more. She didn't ask for thanks. She disappeared before they could stop her. When they opened the chip, it contained coordinates. And something more, an old schematic of the Empire's neural suppression grid. And in the center of that map, a name. Project Orlith. Illyra stared at it for a long time. Then looked at Reuven. And whispered, "They didn't just want to keep me hidden. They wanted to keep this from waking up." He nodded. "Then let's wake it." The coordinates led them to an old relay station suspended at the edge of a dead zone, an abandoned pocket of space where no Empire vessel dared linger too long. There was no trade, no fuel, no signal. Only static. Reuven had to manually override the navigation AI just to stop the ship from autocorrecting away. That was the first clue this place wasn't meant to be found. From orbit, the relay station looked like a shattered wheel, its outer rings broken, drifting slightly apart like the petals of a dead flower. The docking clamps still worked, though. Barely. Their ship locked into place with a deep mechanical groan, as if the structure itself resented being touched again. Inside, it was cold. Not the kind of cold that came from systems being offline, but the cold of memory, the lingering chill of something that had once been alive and had since been sealed away. The corridors were coated in dust, but power hummed beneath the floors, faint but steady. She could feel it before Reuven could even detect it, a resonance running through the station like an old heartbeat trying to restart. They reached the core chamber after bypassing two sealed doors and a biometric lock that, strangely, responded to her. Not just accepted her presence but welcomed it. That was when she knew, this place wasn't just hiding something. It had been waiting for her. The room itself was spherical, walls made of obsidian glass veined with lines of dull silver. In the center hovered a crystalline structure, organic in shape, like a living neural cluster frozen in time. It pulsed softly, not with light, but with feeling. A pressure in the chest. A tightness in the throat. An ache behind the eyes. Reuven had felt pain before. He had survived loss, betrayal, battlefield silence, and every broken thing the Empire could throw at him. But this was different. This was longing. He turned to Illyra. She was shaking not with fear, but with recognition. "This is it," she whispered. "The field." "What does it do?" he asked. She stepped forward slowly, placing her hand on the interface panel that rose from the floor like a blooming wing. Her voice was low, but certain. It's not a weapon. It's not a transmitter. It's a seed. Reuven frowned. A seed for what? For truth. The projection activated with a soft chime. A figure appeared, an ancient recording of a woman with silver skin and eyes like nebulae. She spoke in a language neither of them knew, but the field translated it directly into their minds, bypassing words. The message wasn't data. It was emotion, delivered in waves. We designed this network not to control but to awaken. A signal of empathy, to restore what was lost when fear became law. When suppression replaced sorrow. When numbness became survival. Reuven felt his knees go weak. Illyria closed her eyes, absorbing every word not with her ears, but with her whole being. The field was connected to more than this station. It was rooted across multiple neural nodes in the Empire's deepest infrastructures, buried inside atmospheric processors, food distribution systems, medical implants, even education consoles. Invisible. Dormant. Waiting for something human enough to spark it. You're the spark, Reuven said aloud, staring at her. Illyria opened her eyes. We are. The system required not just a transmitter but a bond. A real one. One that could not be programmed, manufactured, or coerced. The Empire had tried to copy it, failed, and buried the project in fear of what it would reveal. Because when people feel again truly, deeply, they remember. And remembered pain is the first step to rebellion. Reuven stepped forward, hand hovering near hers. The panel flickered. Their link had grown strong enough. The field reacted to their shared frequency, not to command, but to consent. We can light it now, she said. And if we do, he asked. She looked up, the glow of the field dancing in her eyes. Then no one in the Empire will ever be able to unfeel again. They stood in silence, side by side, as the field of feeling hummed quietly between them. It was no longer dormant. It pulsed like a heart that had just remembered it was alive. The interface no longer asked for credentials. It didn't want access codes or biometric scans. It asked for something no machine could fake: willingness. It responded only to two minds aligned not by logic, but by choice. By pain shared freely. By love that had no shape yet, but had stopped needing permission to exist. Illyria looked at Reuven. Not for strength. Not for reassurance. But simply to know that he was still there, still choosing this. He met her eyes and nodded. No hesitation this time. Not after all they had endured. The chases. The collapses. The weight of her breath becoming his own. What began as empathy had become something much more dangerous. Unity. She stepped forward first. The field's crystalline veins lit up in waves, a soft golden glow that responded to her presence like roots drinking sunlight. She placed her hand on the center of the core. Not pressing, not commanding. Just offering. The glow intensified. Reuven stepped beside her and did the same. The moment his hand met the surface, something unseen cracked open. Not outside. Inside. Pain hit first, but not theirs. It was the pain of others. Of billions. Memories they had never lived suddenly poured through them like flood waters released from a dam. A child screaming for a mother in a re-education ward. A rebel bleeding out with a smile because he had remembered his brother's voice before the end. A widow caressing the air where her partner once slept, long after forgetting what their laugh sounded like. These weren't just stories. These were lives. And now they were flowing through Illyria and Reuven like lightning looking for ground. He screamed once, knees buckling, but didn't let go. She trembled, not from fear but from the unbearable weight of being seen by so many at once. The field was awake now. Alive. And it was using them as the bridge it had waited for since the day it had been buried beneath wires and silence. A voice not theirs echoed through the room. Neural consensus achieved. Emotional threshold stabilized. Network reactivation in progress. Then the field spoke again. Not to them. To everything. Invisible waves rippled outward. Across stations. Through satellites. Into machines that had long stopped caring. Across neural implants meant to suppress and filters meant to sterilize thought. Into classrooms where children had learned to answer without questioning. Into soldiers whose hands shook as the sensation of grief returned to them for the first time in years. Into lovers who had forgotten how to touch. Into prisoners who had forgotten how to cry. And for the first time in a generation, people began to feel without restraint. Reuven collapsed to the floor, breath ragged, blood running from his nose, eyes wide and unfocused. Illyria dropped beside him, catching him before he hit the ground fully. Her body spasmed once then steadied. He looked at her through blurry vision. Is it done? She held his face in her hands, the way someone holds something irreplaceable. No, she whispered, tears falling freely now. It's just beginning. And then the console glowed again brighter than before. Echoes detected. Secondary nodes awakening. Emotional cascade initiated. She pressed her forehead gently to his. And in that shared warmth, in the chaos of sensation that no machine could ever interpret, something miraculous happened. They both smiled. Not because it was over. But because, for the first time, they hadn't lost. They had given something the Empire could never take back. The reactivation didn't come with celebration. No fireworks. No anthems. It arrived as a slow unraveling. In cities across imperial sectors, people stopped mid-sentence, mid-march, mid-command. Something pulled at them not like a signal in their ears, but like a memory too heavy to ignore. They touched their chests. They cried without knowing why. They looked at the ones beside them and realized how long it had been since they truly felt the weight of another presence. The Empire's first reaction was denial. Systems were checked. Code was debugged. Officers barked orders into silence as training collapsed under emotion. Entire squads laid down arms, not because they had been ordered to but because they remembered why they had picked them up in the first place. The field of feeling was not a weapon. It was a mirror. And no one could stand in front of it without seeing who they truly were. Back on the relay station, the aftermath was quieter. Reuven lay on the floor of the core chamber, his body racked by exhaustion but alive. His neural implant, once a punishment, had become a transmitter of something beautiful. He had been burned by it. But it hadn't broken him. Illyria sat beside him, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Her hands no longer shook. Her skin no longer felt like it was waiting for the next command. She was calm. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being used. She was choosing. He opened his eyes slowly. Still here? She nodded. Still. He gave a faint smile. So what are we now? She leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Not weapons. Not fugitives. Just human. The relay station began to shift around them. Systems rebooted. Lights flickered back to life. Somewhere deeper inside the structure, old communication lines opened again, no longer encrypted, no longer silenced. Just open. Available. Waiting. A small console nearby activated. A message blinked on the screen. Not from the Empire. From a distant node. Civilian coded. Plain text. We felt it. Who are you? Illyra looked at him. Reuven replied without hesitation. We're the reason you can feel again. Another pause. Then another message. What now? They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Illyra whispered, we teach them how to live with it. And that was how it began. Not with a revolution. Not with blood. But with a conversation. With people remembering that feeling wasn't a flaw. It was the foundation. That pain didn't have to be a prison. That love real, raw, unfiltered was worth everything it cost. Across space, new networks formed. Resistance groups disbanded to become rebuilding circles. Soldiers deserted not to run, but to return home. Empires didn't fall overnight. But they cracked. And cracks, once formed, never close all the way. As for Reuven and Illyra, they didn't disappear. They became something else. A myth. A signal. A truth that could not be silenced. And somewhere, in a small corner of a galaxy finally beginning to breathe again, two hands reached for each other in the dark. And found something worth holding.